Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by award-winning speculative fiction author Colleen. Diana has her debut novel, They Could Be Saviors, and we're going to be talking about her lived experience with psychedelic assisted healing. And when you read her book, it leaves audiences feeling different about billionaires, psychedelics, and the future of our planet. So we're going to be talking to her about the book and everything that she's up to and going to be up to. So, Diana, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a Canadian currently living in Seattle, Washington. I never dreamed that I would ever publish a book, so that was never on my radar. So my life really hasn't followed a path that I ever could have imagined. So, so I'm very humbled to have an award-winning book. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, what made you want to get into writing and write this book?
It kind of found me. So, in 2018, I hit a I was in a point in my life where I no longer wanted to live, and that's a really dark place to be. And I was very fortunate to find an underground psychedelic assisted therapist who I 100% believe saved my life. And since that experience, I've become a trained psychedelic facilitator myself. And I've also learned other tools that have sort of kept me alive. And one of those tools is meditation. And about I guess maybe 5 years ago, when I was meditating, this fully formed concept of a book came into my head while I was meditating, and I didn't really think anything of it. But over the course of probably 6 months or so, the idea just kept coming back to me every time I meditated, and it kind of I kind of thought the universe was asking the wrong person to write a book, because like I said, I've never imagined that I would write anything. I at that time I knew nothing about the craft of writing. I knew nothing about the publishing industry. So it was kind of a shock to me that the universe was asking me to write a book. But I was in a job that I was really, really unhappy in. And my partner at the time, who's now my husband, um, said, I can support you. If you're this unhappy, I can support you, and you have this book idea. Why don't you take some time and try and write it? And that was a really scary kind of proposition, because I'm fiercely independent. So trusting someone else to support me was a big kind of risk for me. But I did. I quit my job, and I sat at my home desk for 8 to 10 hours a day every day. For it's been 4 years since I quit my job, and every day I'm working on writing and writing and publishing. So that's how it all started.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's talk about climate change. Why do you feel that billionaires hold the key to fixing climate change, and what would it take for them to do so?
Yeah, I I really do think that humanity is kind of looking at climate change kind of in the wrong way. So we're basically asking 8 billion people to change their behaviors. We're being told, take shorter showers, don't use plastic straws, use reusable shopping bags. We kind of feel guilty if we don't recycle properly. But there are roughly 3,200 billionaires in the world, and they produce more emissions than 5 billion people combined. So it doesn't make any sense to me why we're trying to change 8 billion people's behavior when if we just changed 3,200 people's behavior, it would have a much, much bigger impact. And the billionaires are also the ones in control of things. So while we're being asked not to use single use plastics, the billionaires are not being told not to produce them. So as consumers, we, you know, we can only choose from what there is. And if they're only producing things that are killing the planet, we kind of have to use them. And I think the onus should be falling on these billionaires not to pollute the planet in the first place.
We'll talk about how you balance hope and despair when you're writing about crises like climate collapse and wealth inequality.
That's a tough one. I think that I think that as a whole, society is lacking hope, and um, partially, I think that authors they're not to blame. But if you look at a lot of climate fiction and dystopian fiction, there's a lot of these books are pretty doomsday-ish, right? Like they're presenting our future that's already broken, and it kind of makes people fatalistic and cynical. I know that younger generations are thinking, well, why am I bothering to go to college if there's no future for me? And so I want to write fiction that brings hope to people, and and the act of writing the book for me gives me hope. And I always say that hope is the consequence of action. So if you want to have hope in your own life, you actually need to do something. And so for me to give myself hope, I wrote a book, and it makes me hopeful, every time I talk about it. So coming on your show, I don't know who's out there listening, and it only takes a couple of people to spread the word, and give more and more people hope.
We'll go ahead and talk about that book, describe to listeners what they can expect when they read it and where they can get it.
Sure. So it's kind of a dystopian-ish. It's near future. So the world is very similar to the world that we're living in now. So climate change is progressing, but not to the point where society has collapsed. It's still very much like what we're living in now, but there's a lot of technology in the book that doesn't exist. So it kind of makes it a little bit sci-fi light. But it's about kidnapping billionaires and coercing them. I don't want to say forcing because it's a little bit different than forcing, but coercing them into psychedelic assisted therapy so that their egos kind of dissolve and they can see what they've been doing to the planet and what they've been doing to society. And then once they can see all of that, they actually want to work together to solve climate change.
Let's take a quick break.
In Kansas, blind vending operators are vanishing without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses, only silence. Detective Michael Miguel thought he had seen everything, but this case pulls him into something far darker, a web of institutional corruption so deep it was never meant to be uncovered. When vulnerable blind people disappear and bureaucracies close ranks, one question remains. Who will fight for justice? As Miguel digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power, a system that exploits the very people it was designed to protect. The truth is buried in paperwork, hidden behind closed doors, guarded by those who have everything to lose. Some conspiracies hide in plain sight. This one hides in the dark. Iron Cane Media presents The Blind Conspiracy, written by Mikhail Battles Sr., available now on Amazon.
Well, why do you feel like psychedelics have the potential to influence not just individuals, but entire cultures and societies?
Sure. So, um, I think that humanity is disconnected. I think we suffer greatly from disconnection, and I think that we're disconnected from ourselves, we're disconnected from nature, and we're disconnected from everyone else. And I think that billionaires suffer from that at an extreme, like even more so than us normal people. Um, and psychedelics have a way of showing you how everything is connected. And once you've seen that, it's really hard to unsee it. So I think that um, it really has the potential to show people that one person can make a difference, and that it's kind of a butterfly effect. So what I do affects everyone else. And if billionaires can actually understand that and care about everyone else, I don't think that they actually care about everyone. They only care about themselves and the elite. So if their minds were expanded and they felt a connection to everyone else on the planet, I think their behavior would change.
What do you hope that readers take away from your book, especially those who are frustrated with the billionaires and the climate crisis?
Um, I want them to see that it is possible to make change, and that it isn't as difficult as we think it is. So, like I was saying before, if you think about trying to change 8 billion people's behavior, that seems really daunting and like something that could really never happen. But if you think about it in terms of changing 3,200 people's behavior, that seems a lot more manageable. And when you look at the effect that it would have to change just their behavior, it really does give you hope. So, like one one private jet, so a billionaire's private jet, just the jet alone creates more carbon emissions than 5,000 people's entire life in a given year, and that's just their jet. And I think the top 10% the top 10% in wealth globally, they create 75% of global emissions. So changing 10% of people's behavior seems a lot more reasonable than changing 90% of people's behavior. So I want people to understand that we do have hope for our future, that like don't give up. Don't think that we're past the point of no return. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. We have no idea what somebody might discover tomorrow. Like there might be some kind of a breakthrough just around the corner that, you know, saves everyone. So I just don't want people to give up and fall into complacency.
If you could sit down with today's most powerful billionaire, what conversation would you want to have with them and why?
I would want to ask them about their legacy. I think that like these billionaires who are shooting rockets into space, thinking that that's their legacy. Oh, space travel. And I don't understand why they're spending all of that money and resources on something like that when they could solve climate change and make this planet even better. And that's kind of where the title of the book comes in. They could be saviors. They could do all of these things with their money, and they're not. And why wouldn't they want to be the savior of humanity? Like if if everyone's going to die because of climate change, wouldn't they? I don't understand why they don't want to be the person who solves it, and humanity survives because of them, rather than, oh, I colonized Mars so that 10 people can live there with no resources. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
What misconception do people most often have about psychedelics, and how do you address the misconceptions in your work?
I think a lot of people are afraid of them. Um, I grew up in the 80s, so the war on drugs was a really big thing. I remember the egg in the frying pan, and I grew up thinking that all drugs are bad, and I didn't touch drugs until I was in my 40s. And I think that when people think of psychedelics, they think people kind of go crazy and do crazy things, and then you can have a bad trip and it's terrifying, and you can have a psychotic break and never come back from that. And some of those things are true, but psychedelic therapy is very different than just having a psychedelic experience. Sort of, I know people will take psychedelics and go to a concert, and that's a very different experience than psychedelic therapy. And um, most of these substances are incredibly safe. You're they're you can't overdose on them. They're not addictive. And if you're in a safe place with a facilitator who is there to support you, there's very, very little that can go wrong. And yes, you might still have sort of an experience where it might be scary, but the facilitator is there to keep you grounded, to sort of bring you back to reality, and also to help you understand what you're learning in the experience.
Do you see psychedelics as a spiritual experience, a medical experience, or somewhere in between?
I think they have the potential for both, and there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with people having psychedelic experiences for spiritual reasons. So, like having a mystical experience is an incredible thing, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And some people really do believe that they see God, they understand God differently after an experience. And I know I certainly understand God in a very different way than I did prior to my experiences. But as far as like medical stuff, the potential of these substances is incredible. So for things like treatment resistant depression and PTSD and addiction, the studies that are being done are absolutely incredible. The VA is currently doing a study on MDMA, and we're really hoping that the FDA clears it for therapeutic use. But there's kind of a lot holding the FDA back, and some of the reasons why these substances haven't been cleared. It's kind of hard to work around why they're not clearing them. For example, one of the reasons that the FDA hasn't approved some of these substances is because you can't have a control group. So with most drugs, you have the group that gets the substance and the group that gets the placebo. But with psychedelics, there's no way to have a placebo group, because if you're on a psychedelic, you're on a psychedelic. And if you're not on it, you're not on it. So there's no real way to have a control group. So that's something that they're trying to figure out a way to sort of get around that.
Well, as someone who critiques billionaires, what would you say to listeners out there who admire and aspire to be like them, like the billionaires?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have lots of money. Um, but I don't think that we should look at these people with billions of dollars as heroes, as successful. I believe that I say billionairism is a mental illness, and once you have that much wealth, it becomes hoarding. So, if we see the TV show Hoarders, we can see a person who is clearly mentally ill, and that illness is affecting them and their family, but it doesn't usually spill out into society. But with billionaires, they're hoarding at, you know, they're hoarding so much that it's affecting every single person on the planet and the planet itself. So I don't really see that as something to strive for. And I also feel like it's immoral. Um, you know, if you have more than you could ever possibly spend in 1,000 lifetimes, and you're walking by people who have no home and no food, and you're doing nothing about it, I just think that's immoral. I don't think it's evil. I think it's immoral because morality is human and morality is something that can be changed. But evil, I don't think can be changed. So I want people to think of it as something that these people are actually choosing to do, and like they're choosing to be immoral.
Well, let's talk about the writing process. To talk about what surprised you most about the writing process and what did you learn about yourself during the process?
I've learned a lot about myself. um, yeah, it has been probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life, and I've done a lot of things. Um, but yeah, it's been really surprising how much work it actually is. And I've learned that I don't quit on everything. So in my past, I have quit on a lot of things. I've quit on a lot of my dreams. And this time I refuse to give up. I'm in this for the long haul. I'm in this, and because I'm so passionate about the message, like I wake up every day thinking, how can I make the world a better place, and how can I help save humanity? And I wish other people would wake up like that every day as well. So that's what I've learned about myself. And I've learned so much about writing itself too. Like I said, when I started, I didn't know anything about writing, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't know anything before. So like I wrote my entire first draft without knowing anything, and then I joined writers groups, critique groups, and all kinds of different groups to help. And I remember going into my first critique group thinking that my my first draft was pretty good, and boy, did I learn it wasn't. So I've also learned to have a thick skin. It was really hard taking feedback, but now I'm really grateful for all the feedback that I can get. Um, yeah, so you definitely have to grow a thick skin if you're going to be a writer.
Well, how can readers use fiction like yours as a tool for their own reflection and growth?
Well, I actually wrote a discussion guide for this book, and if you sign up for my newsletter, you get it for free. It's also available on Amazon for a small cost, but there's a lot of questions in the discussion guide that will make you think about what you actually believe yourself about different things, like obviously about how you feel about billionaires, but also there's like sort of male female dynamics, and there's a lot of fairly deep themes in the book that will really make you think about yourself. And I think that um, you know, even though we're not billionaires, I think we can all question our own privilege and see where we might be able to use our privilege for the greater good.
Talk about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
I just got on Substack, so I've written, I think, 3 or 4 essays on Substack. My Substack is called A Reckoning of Sorts, and it's me, Diana Colleen. So I really enjoy writing the shorter pieces. My latest one that I published a couple days ago um, is very philosophical, and it's about God and house cats, and I think it will really make people think about their thoughts on God. And I'm also working on the second book. So They Could Be Saviors has been marketed as a standalone novel, but it's actually going to be a trilogy. So it has a clear ending. So if you finish They Could Be Saviors, you will have a definite end, and it will be very satisfying that you've come to the end. But there's a lot that can still be said in the same story. So I'm about halfway through book two's first draft. And because I'm a much better writer now than I was when I first started, it shouldn't take as much work to get it published.
Well, throw out your contact info so people can keep up with everything that you're up to.
Sure. Yeah. I'm on most social platforms, Diana Colleen Author. And my website is dianacolleenauthor.com. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. You can Google me. I come up on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm very easy to find.
We'll close this out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Um, I think we covered most things, but I just want to say again that hope is the consequence of action. So if you're feeling like the world, isn't a great place and your life isn't feeling great, just do something. Like I paint a lot. I'm not a good painter. I I throw things away, but just the act of creating something and doing something that you can see brings me hope. I think it brings a lot of people hope. Just doing something that makes the world a beautiful place, and being kind to each other. I think that people forget how much, I guess, power kindness has. So if you think that one person can't make a difference, just think about, um, if somebody gives you a compliment, how great that makes you feel. And then you behave differently because you feel good. So you might go out and give somebody else a compliment and make their day, and kindness spreads. And if everyone tries to be kinder, we will have a kinder world. And right now, I think hate is spreading a lot faster than kindness. And I really hope that we can change that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, go pick up that book. They Could Be Saviors, and be ready for the second book to come out. And visit Colleen's Substack and her website, or Diana's website and her Substack at dianacolleenauthor.com. Please be sure to follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Also, if you haven't done so, visit www.curveball337.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Leave me some voicemail. It's a possibility it might be played on the show. And, drop a line if you have any suggestions or anything, any kind of feedback for the show. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Diana, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.